welcome to the first episode of Drew's Brew Reviews. Now, what this is a little offshoot from the Pints of Interest podcast that we do, where normally there's three of us or a bunch of people that all talk about a single beer. We might compare glassware and give our overall opinions of that. Now, that can be a little bit of a longer episode, so we want to do something just a little bit quicker, a little bit shorter, and a little bit more now. So, with that in mind, what I am going to be looking at today is actually a very interesting beer. It was a collaboration from Stone, 10 Barrel, and Blue Jacket. Now, I've never had anything from 10 Barrel or Blue Jacket, so this will be a new experience. The beer is Suede. It's an Imperial Porter. Has an ABV of 9.6%. I paid $11 for this particular beer. A pint glass or a mug, something along those lines, would be the appropriate glass for this. Serving temperature is usually on the colder side. In Imperial, I'd probably go to the higher end, maybe, around 50 degrees. So here is this particular one. Show the bottle off. It's an ale brewed with calendula flowers, jasmine, and honey. Now, calendula flowers are they're kind of like marigolds. Nice orangey colored flowering. Jasmine's more for a fragrant type of flower. I have had a few other beers that had it in there. Usually give it kind of a tea-ish quality. Usually a little bit lighter beer too than an Imperial Porter. It's a very interesting mix to have this floral quality and with the honey. I mean, it really comes across more like something you'd expect from Dogfish Head rather than, Stone in this collaboration. But, hey, I poured out this dark beauty here. Just a little bit brownish. If you hold it up to the light, a little bit of a tan head. Not a whole heck of a lot of lacing to it. Really didn't have too much of a head to it. Just a little bit of, like I mentioned, creamy tan. Pretty standard porter aroma too out of the pint glass here. You get a little bit of the honey. It's just a little peaty, roasty kind of molasses smell to it, but it really backs off. Not overly sweet for having the floral qualities or the honey in there. Expected it to be just slightly more earthier or floral with it. Maybe with that peatiness is kind of giving the earthiness I was expecting with this one. Yeah, maybe just a hint. It smells like a little hint of brightness of raisin, but I think that's really the honey and the molasses kind of mixing together in this, maybe some of the malt. So go ahead and give this one a try here. Definitely has a richness to it. There's a thickness to the beer, more so than a porter usually is. I usually consider porters to be fairly thin, even some Imperial Porters that I've had in the past, but this has a really nice carbonation that really adds to the kind of creamy mouthfeel. It's not a milky creaminess, it's just a real full mouthfeel that this gives. It has a nice roastiness to it with just a bit of that honey that's in there that kind of nicely comes in the end and adds this really fresh, interesting tang that happens. Now, I think the tang is basically coming from the marigolds in this process, the calendula flowers, because when you use that in cooking, it typically creates a very tangy, bitter quality to the food that you added to the ingredients. And this doesn't necessarily really have the bitterness from it. I think the honey really rounds out that bitterness, keeps it down. There's a little bit of it almost gets to be a little bit burnt after that sweet honey kind of comes through. I think the jasmine kind of gets overrun by some of the other qualities. I think there's just that slightly tea quality that's there. That's kind of interesting, but gets lost in the mix. I'd say this is more of a honey porter with interesting qualities. That marigold, calendula, that's going to be very difficult, I think, to pick out. But a little bit of a drier finish doesn't stick around. The flavor in general is actually on the lighter side. Quite a nice beer, nice porter. It's a drinkable porter that has a little bit of complexity to it. There's some interesting flavors going on in there. And when you hear Imperial Porter and those floral qualities, the jasmine and everything that's in there, you don't think it's going to work too well, but this actually works really well. As long as you like your porters a little bit on the roasty side, this is quite good. Decent beer overall. Yeah, I'd recommend picking this one up if you can find it, especially for $11 for the bomber size bottle. 9.6%. An interesting collaboration from them. I hope they do some more in the future. Yeah, Suede. That's not a bad name for it because it's kind of velvety smooth in its mouthfeel and its quality. So it would be nice to see some of the more unique elements just kind of bust through a little bit that roastiness, but quality beer, definitely. And just a quick note about the different beer glasses. I actually tried this in a pint glass and a snifter. In the snifter, Smell wasn't as complex, kind of cut the sweetness, and in the taste as well. Wasn't quite as sweet, didn't have quite the mouthfeel that I wanted, really enhanced the roastiness in it. It actually didn't have the complexity as it did out of the pint glass, so clearly recommended glass is the way to go for the Suede. So definitely recommended from me. See if you can find it out there and give it a try. Thanks again for watching. For more beer reviews and episodes, you can go to pintsofinterest.net. You can also follow us on Twitter @PintsOfInterest for 140-character beer reviews.